Hi, welcome to our presentation on distillation of OpenAI models by DeepSeek. I want you to imagine this. You are a researcher at a frontier AI laboratory. Your team has spent 2 years and billions of dollars training a model that finally achieves the state-of-the-art performance. Then come 3 months later, a competitor releases an open source by learning from your model's outputs. In fact, this is not a hypothetical scenario. In January 2025, a Chinese AI firm called DeepSeek released a chatbot which allegedly was constructed by distilling OpenAI's own outputs. OpenAI characterizes this as theft, while DeepSeek characterizes it as innovation. Well, what is it? In fact, the deeper one examines this controversy, the more apparent it becomes, and this is exactly what we'll be doing today. Before we begin, what even is distillation? Here is an example of a specific type of distillation called knowledge distillation. It is a technique where we first train a large teacher network on the original training data. Once the teacher is trained, we then train a smaller, more efficient student network to mimic the teacher's outputs at a fraction of the training cost. Now that we know what distillation is, let's go back to January 2025. DeepSeek allegedly utilized OpenAI's API to generate millions of examples of the reasoning model's O1's responses, which was then fed back into their own model. Well, the deeper implication of this is that DeepSeek has chosen to release the model weights publicly, meaning anyone can download them, anyone can build upon them, and in fact, anyone can modify them. This represents the free and open source software movement, or commonly known as FOSS, which is accelerating AI progress at a breakneck pace. At the time of the initial controversy in January 2025, open source models were only 2 to 3 months behind closed source American models. And this trend has persisted ever since up till now in December 2025, where DeepSeek has in fact released DeepSeek v3.2, which has largely reached and on several benchmarks surpassed GPT 5.1. Now, in this presentation, we shall examine this controversy through the lens of ethics, whether DeepSeek's actions were right or wrong. We will analyze this from the perspectives of multiple stakeholders. Subsequently, we will zoom out to reveal something more troubling, an acceleration deadlock, where adverse outcomes appear inevitable regardless of how we judge individual actions. Finally, we will evaluate why current regulatory frameworks are failing and propose a plausible alternative.
Let's return to ethics. We use the framework called ethical decision tree to judge DeepSeek's actions. The first question, is this legal? DeepSeek's distillation violates OpenAI's terms of service by utilizing the output to train competing models. However, the copyright law does not specify that. It's hard for courts to decide on this since AI trains and generates in similar way as people learn. Even more, DeepSeek operates from China, which is beyond the US jurisdiction. As a result, DeepSeek's actions are in the legal gray area. The second question, does this violate professional duties? We examine this through the ACM Code of Ethics. ACM Principle 1.5 states that respect the work required to produce inventions. OpenAI invested billions of dollars in data centers and research training O1 model. Yet, distillation extracts their outcome with no consent and no contribution back to the original work. This is considered disrespectful for intellectual property. ACM Principle 1.2 demands avoid harm. This is more serious. DeepSeek's open weights enable downstream applications they cannot control, including that cybercriminals developing sophisticated attacks, legal states building AI weapons, malicious actors exploring biochemical applications. Evidence of such misuse has already emerged. A cybersecurity firm reportedly utilized a coding agent to discover software vulnerabilities and exploit them. This also violates BCS Code of Conduct Article 1 that members shall have due regard for public health, privacy, security, and well-being of others and the environment. Thus, DeepSeek's actions fail to conform to the professional ethics. The third question, what produces the greatest good for the greatest number? Free and open source software proponents argue that distillation is beneficial. Large technology corporations have monopolized AI capabilities and control all access to frontier models. Distillation disrupts this monopoly. It makes everyone have access to the advanced AI. However, closed source proponents argue that distillation is harmful, similarly to the previous analysis from us. If competitors can simply distill outputs, there is no incentive to innovate and to invest in new models. and releasing the blades provides dangerous capabilities to actors who alternate possess them. Once done, no safety controls remains useful. This open sourcing, in fact, hinders the development of AI and brings more risks, meaning not ethical.
Our assessment is that both sides are partially correct. Open source generally expands assets, but it also accelerates when dangerous capabilities become widespread. Closed source preserves safety and investment incentives, but it concentrates AI power in a small number of corporations. Now let's look at the stakeholders and their ethical responsibilities. DeepSeek bears the primary responsibility for releasing distilled weight and violating ACM 1.5, respect the work of others, and enabling downstream harm. OpenAI acted within ethical bounds in protecting its IP, yet its closed model contributes to a global AI power imbalance. The false community amplifies the dynamic by rapidly building on DeepSeek's release, even though many operate in good faith and see openness as a public good. Government is also responsible for failing to create international frameworks to manage AI development, allowing competitive pressure to dominate. The deeper issue is structural. The system pushes every actor into these choices, regardless of the intent, leading directly to the acceleration deadlock.
We have judged DeepSeek's actions as ethically problematic from a deontological perspective and yet ambiguous from a utilitarian one. However, here is the uncomfortable truth. Even if every actor agreed these actions were wrong, this dynamic would still continue. The current AI boom is fueled by huge capex. Microsoft, Google, Meta, and others are collectively spending over $200 billion per year on AI infrastructure. The S&P 500 has become dangerously skewed, with the Magnificent Seven tech stocks now accounting for more than 1/3 of the entire index. The fundamental problem is this: FOS's movement will always catch up. DeepSeek's distillation shows us that closed source models possess no long-term modes. Whatever OpenAI trains today, the open source community will reproduce within months. Companies like DeepSeek publish papers which these techniques then get spread through the entire community. Hence, modes have become impossible. Allow us to walk through what we term the acceleration deadlock step by step. We begin with the implication of the FOS's movement. That is, this little model means that no mode can exist, as open source is always only 2 to 3 months behind closed source. This leads to a crucial decision point. Does the AI bubble burst? First, consider scenario A. The bubble does not burst. If investors continue funding the race, frontier labs must continuously accelerate to justify their returns. They have assumed massive debt and promised transformative returns, and hence they must maintain their lead. However, FOSS makes this increasingly difficult. Consequently, these corporations cut corners to preserve their advantage, for example, by reducing AI safety testing to release these models more quickly. Evidence of this dynamic already exists. Last week, Sam Altman reportedly declared code red at OpenAI following DeepSeek's and DeepMind's latest release. 6 months ago, xAI's Grok was manipulated into glorifying historical atrocities due to insufficient testing. The pressure to ship is currently overriding caution, which leads us to accelerate into unsafe, powerful AI systems. Now consider scenario B. The bubble does burst. If the bubble collapses, an economic crash ensues. Current AI capex is funded substantially by corporate and private debt. A burst would trigger job losses across the tech sector and likely a broader recession. However, here is the critical insight. Compute will become cheaper and more abundant. All of a sudden, actors who previously could not afford frontier skill training now can. Consequently, bad actors such as malicious hackers or even rogue states now gain access to capabilities previously reserved only for well-funded frontier labs. And due to the decentralized nature of FOSS, now no safety controls exist nor any alignment research exists anymore. This path also leads us accelerating into unsafe, powerful AI systems. Hence, sadly, both scenarios converge on the same outcome, whether the bubble bursts or not, whether DeepSeek's actions were ethical or not. Free market dynamics will push us towards dangerous capabilities becoming widely and uncontrollably accessible. Hence, the Pandora's box has already been opened.
Has any existing powerful political body attempted to decelerate this reckless acceleration dialogue? The answer is yes, but these efforts have proven ineffective. Last year, the EU implemented the AI Act, comprehensive requirement for transparency, safety testing, and human oversight. On paper, these measures appear reasonable, but in practice, they have proven counterproductive and have backfired. What happens in reality of the AI Act is that EU-based researchers simply depart for the United States. Startups relocate to London or mainly to San Francisco, which have laxer AI rules and red tapes. European AI firms such as Mistral fall significantly further behind American and Chinese competitors. EU ventures funding AI has collapsed relative to other regions. According to a survey published by Apply AI Initiative, 16% of the survey AI startups consider quitting AI development or moving out of the EU. The consequence is clear. Those who try to regulate, in this case, the EU is left behind. The EU cannot compare OpenAI, DeepMind, or Anthropic in San Francisco to decelerate. They cannot compel DeepSeek in Hangzhou to cease releasing weights. They can only hand together their own researchers. Furthermore, the geopolitical reality must be acknowledged. Neither the United States nor China possesses any incentive to slow down. AI will determine military supremacy, it will determine economic dominance, it will shape the future of warfare. Even the EU is now falling back on its hawkish rules. They have recognized the fundamental problem. This constitutes a global prisoner's dilemma. Any nation that regulates aggressively falls behind. Any nation that does not contribute to regulation only accelerates the race. The only solution would be international coordination, a global treaty. However, such coordination will not materialize. Nuclear non-proliferation functions because weapons require rare materials, massive infrastructure, and all detectable from space. AI, on the other hand, requires only code and compute, both increasingly commoditized and impossible to monitor. More fundamentally, even if 100 nations convene to agree on safe AGI, they would not share the same vision of what safe means. Whose values will be encoded? American individualism, Chinese social harmony, or European precaution? An international coalition is not forthcoming.
We believe it's necessary to assume that massive productivity gain through AI will materialize in the near future. Due to the nature of technological advancement, we cannot unrelease DeepSeek's weights and we cannot undiscover these techniques. The question is not how to halt AI progress, but how to navigate it. Hence, it allows us to walk through what we should do differently, using an ethical decision tree. First, we ask, is there a systemic issue that individual ethical judgments cannot resolve? And yes, the acceleration deadlock demonstrates that even if all actors behave ethically, free market dynamics still produces harmful outcomes. Hence, we must address these systemic factors. Second, we ask, can traditional regulation resolve this? And no, as seen with the EU's failure, it shows that in this case, unilateral regulation only disadvantages the regulator. Third, we ask, is international coordination feasible? And no, as we've seen that geopolitical factors render this impossible. Therefore, we must pursue alternative approaches that operate within the existing dynamic rather than attempting to halt progress altogether, which is impossible. First, politicians must collaborate with individuals possessing technical expertise. Policymakers with no understanding of AI attempting to regulate it, as you see in the EU, produce either ineffective or counterproductive rules. This aligns with ACM Principle 2.7. Computing professionals should foster public awareness and understanding of computing. Second, massive investment in education and upskilling is essential. The gap between AI-empowered workers and others will widen dramatically. For students today, the priority should be understanding these systems, not to compete with AI, but to work alongside it. Countries that fail to upskill risk permanent economic subordination. Manufacturing may soon return to developed nations as cheap human labor loses its advantage to AI, and developing regions such as South Asia, South America, and Africa risk being permanently left behind. Finally, serious consideration of UBI is necessary. The productivity gains from AI could prove enormous, but only if distributed equally rather than concentrated at the top. Thank you.